Today we're diving into a side of psychology that's, well, pretty fascinating and, honestly, often misunderstood: the odd or eccentric personality disorders.
We all know someone we might call quirky or eccentric, but where's the actual line between just having a unique personality and what a clinician would call a disorder? That is the big question we're going to tackle today as we explore what's known as Cluster A.
So this group includes 3 specific disorders: paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal. Now what's so interesting is they all share this common thread of social awkwardness and withdrawal. But as you'll see, they get to that point for totally different reasons, creating these 3 really distinct profiles of isolation.
Okay, first up, we have paranoid personality disorder, or PPD. And this isn't just about being a little cautious. We're talking about a deep, pervasive sense of distrust that really colors every single part of a person's life.
Yeah, so this is way beyond just being suspicious once in a while. For someone with PPD, it's like they're seeing the entire world through a lens of mistrust. They're constantly expecting to be betrayed or harmed, even when there's absolutely zero evidence for it.
And this is where you can really see how it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy. Their fierce independence pushes people away, which then, in their mind, just confirms their belief that you can't trust anyone. They might take something tiny, like a neighbor's dog barking, and see it as a deliberate, personal attack. It's a cycle that just leads to more and more isolation.
And really, it all boils down to this one core belief, which might have roots in early experiences, like having parents with impossibly high standards, creates this state of constant, high-alert vigilance that makes any kind of genuine human connection feel almost impossible.
So let's pivot to the second disorder in Cluster A, schizoid personality disorder. And you'll see how it's a completely different ballgame. While paranoia is what drives isolation in PPD, something else entirely is going on here.
So the key word, the most important word here, is detachment. People with SPD aren't avoiding relationships because they're afraid or suspicious. They just don't want them. They're lone wolves, not because they have to be, but because they prefer it.
This gives you a really clear profile of what's often called the detached loner. They can seem indifferent, with a very narrow emotional range. Praise doesn't lift them up, criticism doesn't bring them down. And here's the crucial part: they are genuinely content with being alone. It doesn't cause them any distress.
Okay, on to our third and final disorder in this cluster, schizotypal personality disorder, or STPD. And this is where that odd and eccentric label really comes to life in some pretty distinct ways.
I mean, the features here are really unique. This is more than just being a little socially awkward. You might see very unusual ways of dressing, speech that kind of wanders off into strange tangents, and a belief in things like telepathy or clairvoyance. And a really key feature is something called ideas of reference, that nagging feeling that random, unrelated events are somehow all about you. Now, this is such a critical distinction. With an idea of reference, the person with STPD might think 2 people whispering across the room are talking about them, but you can reason with them. You can challenge that belief. With the delusion of reference, which you see in schizophrenia, that belief is rock solid. It's fixed, unshakable. That difference in how firm the belief is, that's a huge part of the diagnosis.
So this naturally brings up a bigger question, right? How do these disorders, especially schizotypal, connect to something like schizophrenia? And if we can define them so clearly, why are they so notoriously hard to treat?
This is such a fascinating concept. Think of it like this. A person with STPD might actually carry the genetic recipe for schizophrenia, but for whatever reason, it expresses itself in a much milder, kind of watered-down way. They have the genetic link, but they don't have the full-blown psychotic disorder.
And get this, a huge study out of Denmark provides some really compelling evidence for this idea. Researchers followed children who had schizophrenic parents but were adopted into healthy families. And just look at the results. A way bigger percentage of those kids developed schizotypal PD than developed schizophrenia itself, which strongly points to that shared genetic foundation. This table just breaks it down perfectly. You can really see the difference in severity. In STPD, you might have what are called illusions, like a feeling that someone is in the room. In schizophrenia, those become full-blown hallucinations. Beliefs go from these questionable ideas in STPD to absolutely fixed, unshakable delusions in schizophrenia. It's a clear step up in intensity. So here's the tough part. Despite everything we know, treatment is a massive challenge. The prognosis is often pretty poor because these personality patterns are incredibly rigid. I mean, they've been in place for years, decades even. They're a core part of how the person sees and interacts with the world. And because the core problem is different for each one, you can't have a one-size-fits-all treatment. For paranoid PD, the first and by far the hardest step is just building a tiny bit of trust. For schizoid and schizotypal, it's often about building basic social skills. And for STPD, it's also super important to treat other things that often go along with it, like depression. But this all leads to a huge question, doesn't it? If our best efforts aren't really working, are we just bad at treating it? Or is the problem actually deeper? The thinking here suggests the issue might actually be in how we're diagnosing these things in the first place. And this is the real kicker. What if our current methods are only looking at the tip of the iceberg? You know, the behaviors we can see on the surface. They might be completely missing the deep psychological forces that are driving the disorder. It's like we're treating the symptoms without ever really understanding the root cause. And so that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. If the very framework we use for diagnosis is flawed, it challenges us to think so much bigger. It's not just about finding a better therapy, it's about fundamentally changing how we understand, assess, and maybe even categorize the very nature of human personality. What are we missing?